With the chicken and with the beef, because the beef was tastier for me.
Yeah.
As prominent as the habanero, or no?
No. The habanero was like, that was overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm glad that was not the challenge. I would not have done it. I'm going to be real.
No, I'm glad. Y'all should have a certain level of, you should have a line.
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't.
I do as the views ask, and that's all.
As the viewers ask and demand. So take note, viewers.
Yeah.
Comment below and see what Evan can do.
If we get enough views, sure, I'll do something stupid again.
Oh, I like this. Okay, cool.
So
I
don't know what that view count needs to be, but, surprise us.
Aim high.
Yeah.
For your own sake. Aim high.
Okay, let's go back and talk about the first part with Plant with Purpose. Plant with Purpose.
You slipped into Plant with a Purpose, and I was like, do we make a joke of it? Do we keep going?
No, make a joke
I wonondered the same thing. I was like, are we going to...
You and I looked at each other, we're like, we're just...
Feel free to jump in and make fun of it. Because, I caught myself a couple times, and I was like, I'm just going to keep talking. But, okay. So do you want to ask your questions?
Yeah.
And then we'll just edit that back into the first part.
Cool. Okay. So I know some organizations go in and kind of try to meet an immediate need that has to happen before they can progress further to help restoration and change and so forth happen. So what does that look like with Plant with a Purpose? Now I'm saying Plant with a Purpose.
You caught yourself. Good job.
What does that look like with Plant with Purpose when you go into a new community to kind of get them started in the process?
Yeah. So it is interesting, right? Different organizations take different approaches. A country like Haiti, I think there's thousands of nonprofits that work there, and I'm sure everyone has the best intentions, but we do know that sometimes you can hurt when you're trying to help. And so for us, this is why relationship building is so key, and it does take time. So we're not an organization that leaps in with food aid where that's needed. There are other organizations that do that when it's necessary, but we start by building relationships, and that's why our staff are locals. They're speaking, in certain countries where there's different dialects, they're speaking those dialects and building relationships. Something that really stuck with me is a story our executive director, Scott Sabin, told us about when we started our program in Haiti over 20 years ago. He'd been invited by a local priest to visit with some communities and start to hear about what was going on, and they actually hiked for 4 or 5 hours to this one very remote community to talk to people there. And there was this lady in the crowd who kind of said to Scott, look, we know how this works. Like, you've got a bunch of money. We want to know what's our cut, like what's in it for us.
Wow.
And he was stunned. Like, this is a pretty remote area, but other organizations had come, done one thing, and left. And that's what she was saying is, our lives aren't sustainably better. Maybe one need got fixed at the time, but then they left, so why should we work with you? We know you need good results. Like, it was really an affronting conversation. Yeah. So he kind of responded at the time, look, we're different. We're never going to give things away, but we're also not going to leave until you want us to, So that's where, for us, it's key. Through our local staff, you build trusting relationships with communities. We've actually moved towards having written agreements sometimes with communities, right? Yeah. Because sometimes you'd start to work somewhere and then the community would say, but why can't you give us this for free? It's like, well, no, that's not our approach, and you can do it yourselves. That's why we're, teaching and training and equipping. So it takes time to make sure everybody's on the same page and wants to participate in the program. We're not forcing anybody. And so our strongest community partnerships is when you get a few farmers to kind of come on board as early adopters. They're brave enough to try some new agricultural techniques on their farms, and the neighbors get to see the results. Then there's kind of some proof in the pudding, because it's hard when your livelihood is based on what you're growing from the land. Why should you make a change and take a risk? What if you lost your harvest? So trust is really, really important. So for our organization, building those relationships and then walking with communities, often it's for between 7 and 10 years before we then graduate. And then that community really becomes the teacher and trainers for others as well. And given we're talking about root causes and environmental issues, it does take a while to see that restoration of the land. You plant a tree, it's going to take 7 to 10 years, some varieties, to really grow. So it takes time, but then the community is so equipped that they're ready for us to move on. So that's kind of how we work with communities.
You've mentioned a couple times local staffing. So
Yes.
people who already have lived there, grow up there, know the dialects. How do y'all go about hiring staff, and what does that look like in the different communities?
Yeah, it can be a challenge in a country like Burundi. For when we're trying to hire a senior agricultural technician, somebody who has that training and a university degree probably doesn't want to go work in the rural areas that we're working. And a lot of people with advanced university degrees have left the country, right? So we find that through our local recruiting, the staff that join us are really doing it as an act of their faith. So they're living out their faith with our ministry. So we find, with our local staff, there's very low turnover. Some of our country directors, like Guy in Haiti, has been with us 20 years.
That's amazing.
Luis in Mexico has been with us 20 years. And other times, sometimes our staff come from former program participants who were able to save up through the savings and loan group to go away to school and then come back and join our organization, or we're maybe able to help train them up to fill a role as well. So it can be a challenge, but I am so impressed by our staff around the world. Our country director in Congo is a guy named Barori, who's in his 30s, and his leadership skills are just unbelievable. And the change he's been able to help bring about in that watershed, I'm just so impressed by him, and it's really him living out his faith through the role he's doing with us. So we're really grateful for him and for all our local staff.
That's great.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. All right, we're going to move on to now that last part. All right, we're going to move into the last part of the interview now, where we're going to talk a little bit more about Valerie and her story and how she has come to be with Plant with Purpose and, kind of all that good stuff. So, do you want to kind of start off by talking about when did you know working for a nonprofit, kind of in a ministry role, that's what you wanted to do? When was that moment for you?
Gosh, it was probably a very long time ago. I remember even in grade 3, I think it was, seeing, really it was a picture in the newspaper that captured me. I probably wasn't reading that well in grade 3. And I won't describe the picture because it was kind of disturbing, but that's what I think started to open my eyes to global justice issues in general, and just that awareness of, not everybody's born into a middle-class family. In Toronto, Canada, that's where I'm from. So I ended up pursuing studies in international relations and focusing on a variety of global justice issues. That eventually took me to New York, where I was in the United Nations realm for a few years doing advocacy with Save the Children. So that was mostly focused on maternal, newborn, and child health. And my eyes were really opened to the challenges for some of the world's most vulnerable people. In that situation, it was mostly women and children I was focused on, but realizing the challenges of people living in very remote rural areas and just the tremendous lack of resources. In that case, looking at health services. And so when I moved to Houston, I admit that was reluctantly at first.
I was going to ask, that's a big change.
Yeah, so it's my husband's fault. I mean, not his fault, but so I'm very grateful for it now. So my husband, Dan, he's from Perth, Australia. So here we are, opposite sides of the world. We meet in New York. He's actually in the energy sector on the finance side. So it was his job that took us to Houston. I was reluctant to leave Save the Children as I wanted to continue to do work on global justice issues. And then fortunately, I just saw the posting for Plant with Purpose, had never heard of this organization. And it really kind of hit me that, okay, so they're focusing on the world's most vulnerable people. That's always been a lifelong passion of mine, like reaching the hardest to reach people. But then they're doing it in this way where they're combining, faith and the environment. That was a whole new thing for me. I think growing up and studying political science and international relations, I'd really adopted a human rights perspective. And while I had always felt, close to God and nature, and I cared about the environment, I hadn't really connected the environment piece to my faith, either. So here is Plant with Purpose showing me that one of the best ways to help serve and partner with the poorest, most vulnerable people is to care for the environment, and that they can become champions of taking care of creation. And that's one of the best ways to grow out of poverty. Like, just seeing how these three things intersected, the light bulb went off for me. And I feel kind of ashamed that it hadn't gone off for me earlier in my life, but I'm really grateful that it did through Plant with Purpose.
Yeah, that's I think it's cool that you can tie all this back to being in third grade and seeing a picture.
Yeah.
Like, that was the moment that, like, something clicked for you. And I think, kind of that almost moment, like, for Paul, where, like, the scales fell from his eyes, right? Like, that he saw things for what they were. And it's like, I think once you have, like, you see things for what they are, you have to react in some way, and you're like, whether that reaction is to ignore it, to not do anything about it, or to do something about it. Like, you have to react in some way once you have that kind of revelation moment. And so, it's cool to hear you say that for that moment. It was like, okay, I know I want to do something further on with all this. That's really neat. So kind of talking about your backstory and kind of what led you to this point. I think for a lot of us, it's not a immediate, we have that revelation moment, but it's not immediate. You were in third grade. So I don't know.
Mom, Dad, dropping everything.
Yeah. But, like, for people maybe a little bit older that have that moment, I don't think any of us really just drop what we're doing and are like, all right, I'm sold to going and fixing this problem in the world, to helping this group of people, whatever it is. And I think we face a lot of barriers, both socially, mentally, physically. There's a lot of things that come into it. I mean, you moved from Canada to Houston to do what you're doing now. Like, that's a big physical barrier, I would say.
Yeah.
That's not an easy move. And so kind of want to talk about how have you in your own life, and would you encourage people out there that maybe have had that moment where they're like, okay, I see something in the world I want to go change, but I see these barriers in my life that I'm hesitant to go and actually do something about it.
What's coming to my mind is some quotes from this amazing couple I met in Oaxaca in southern Mexico, Eleuterio and Yolanda. So they're two partnering farmers with Plant with Purpose. And Eleuterio said, God is waiting for us to trust him. And his wife Yolanda said, our God is a big God. And I think that's something that I've really reflected on in just my journey. I wasn't planning on moving to Houston. I love it here now, don't get me wrong, but that was a hard change, and not having family here. And I actually gave birth to triplets 4.5 months ago, and it's like, whoa, but you see, this was all God's plan to have it happen here. And so looking back, I'm like, I wish I'd trusted God more. Like, God really had me here for a reason, to find Plant with Purpose. I had no idea I was meant to have 3 babies at one time, but Houston's the perfect place to do it with the medical center. So you feel a bit foolish when you look back and say, God actually laid this out perfectly. I just didn't realize it. And in a way, God had much bigger things in store for me than I had dreamed, right? Wow. And so sometimes I think we do get a little stuck in our comfort zone, and it's something I've had to challenge myself to, is that God made me to do extraordinary things, just like he made you and all of us. He's equipped us with gifts and talents, and we're not serving anybody by not using them, right? And so it's hard to say, like, what is that first step, but just trusting God and trusting the abilities he's given us. And I think really it's through the people we know as well, and the relationships we have, that can help encourage us to take a step too. That I've really found that for me in Houston. I've met so many wonderful partners through Plant with Purpose, and they've helped me broaden my way of thinking and be able to take more steps in my faith journey just by being who they are and how they're living out their faith.
Yeah, I think recently in my life with barriers in my own life of like I just graduated back in May. And I was convinced for the longest time that I was not going to be in Houston, Texas, that I was going to move out of state, that I was going to go start this life. I was going to, disassociate from essentially my family, all this other stuff. Not disassociate in a bad way, but just physically, I had been around my family's been around me my entire life. And I was just I'm ready to kind of take that step back and make myself my own person. And, I was looking at Washington, D.C., and I was convinced. I was like, this is where the Lord's calling me. It's Washington, D.C. And sure enough, kind of went through one thing and another. My mom found out about this job that was opening up here in Chapelwood. And she was like, just apply. You don't know. And I was like, fine, whatever. I'll apply. I applied, and through the whole application process, the more and more I learned about it, the more and more I was like, wow. This is, I'd really love to do this. And so, looking back now, it's so easy for me to say, okay, God had a plan there. And, in my whole entire life, I've wanted to do ministry. It wasn't like I was wanting to go to D.C. to be an accountant or a lawyer or something like that. And God's like, no, you're going to go into ministry. I was like, no, I wanted to go there to do ministry. I just didn't know the ministry the Lord was calling me into. And sometimes he doesn't show you that door until literally right when he opens it. And so, yeah, I think, people just need to, you have to be willing to go through the doors that God opens and kind of let go of sometimes our own ideas of what our life should look like and our own ideas of what we even, for me, it was I had formed in my own head, this is what God's written for me. When it was what I had written for myself, and I was just telling me that's what God wanted. And so, we have to be open to that thought that sometimes, okay, is this what God wants for me, or is this really what I want for myself? And I think if we can really distinguish between that, we see a lot of those barriers, at least mentally, go down.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I can't wait until your mom hears this podcast to hear you acknowledge that God worked through her to get you here.
We'll cut that part out. She can't know.
Maybe the disassociation part.
Yeah.
That came across the wrong way.
Yeah. Not the right choice of words. Yep. All right. Well, Valerie, thanks for coming on, and thanks for talking about your story and everything. Kind of at the end, we always open this up to our guest, whoever we have on, to kind of look into the camera and share whatever you want to share, whether it's with Plant with a Purpose, it's something personal, there's something else you want to plug. This is your moment. No one's going to stop you. Share what you want to share, and we will share it along with the podcast.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Evan and Sarah, for having me on today. I definitely want to thank Chapelwood for being a wonderful partner to Plant with Purpose. And for anybody listening, I just encourage you to continue to discover your own gifts and talents that God has given you. And if you are interested in caring for God's creation, check out some of the stories from Plant with Purpose, because I guarantee you'll be inspired by how our partnering farmers are doing that. And they don't have, the same resources that we have here, and yet they're making different choices to care for God's creation in their own backyard, and that has ripple effects around the world. And they're doing that while growing out of poverty with their families. So I encourage you to think about caring for God's creation, the connection to poverty, even here in our own backyard. So follow Plant with Purpose on Instagram, sign up for our newsletter, and I hope you enjoy learning about it and seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Valerie.
Yeah,
it was great.
So much.
Great conversation, a lot of fun today, a lot of new things learned.
Thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. We're going to turn on all notifications so that we don't... Howdy, and thanks for watching. Please leave a like and comment on this video. And if you aren't subscribed already to the Your Why channel, go ahead and subscribe. Also, don't forget to turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. If anything during the video piques your interest, go ahead and check out the descriptions in the link below. Go and find your why, people.